Hi all, welcome to another episode of Cybeers. Jack, Rich, feels like just yesterday we were doing Movember 2023.
I know.
Now we're doing Movember edition 2024.
Well, you guys were doing 2023.
Oh, that's right. You didn't do it because
yes.
you've worked out you can actually grow facial hair.
Yeah, it's a small secret.
So as always, almost as always, joined by Richard Granger, Global Head of Digital Forensics.
Thank you for having me again.
And almost special guest, Jack Rutherford, CTO, all the way in from Canberra.
Not here too often these days, but great to be back.
No, we had to bring that Tom Selleck mo in. Now, I had to explain to you who Tom Selleck was the other day.
Still don't really know who it is.
Magnum PI. Did you get on and watch the Magnum PI?
I think it's a compliment. I'm not too sure. Haven't figured it out yet.
It's a strong mo. So, Rich, you've gone just the classic Ted Lasso this year.
I need to do a bit of tidy up on it, but yeah, it's coming through all right.
Yeah, I got a message the other day about my mutton chops that are starting to show through. So, as always, every donation counts, every dollar counts, every cent. So, if you're watching this and you can afford $2, $3, we'll take 300, 3,000 as well. Total's up to around 14,700 at the moment, I think.
Big crew doing it this year as well.
Yeah,
like 27 people,
27 people, 27 delightful moustaches.
It's so good.
As always, gentlemen, we've got a few beers as well that we're going to sample. Now, I've got an issue with this one. I've been stitched up.
You've got an issue with Big Nick?
I've got an issue with Big Nick. I've absolutely been stitched up. We brew this beer. Shout out to the guys down at the beer factory. We're heading down tomorrow to do Cybeer as well because, again, we were meant to brew Cybeer. We did Triskele. And I got stitched up by this one. And thank you to Lana, our head of marketing, for titling it Big Nick. So aptly, this week, I have a Big Nick. Jack, what have you got going on?
Well, I've gone the other one in the self-brewed range, the Triskele. I've tried it before. I've been told that it's a divisive taste, this one.
It's earned.
But these are the only two we have right now because although one would think that we would have brewed a Cybeer, we haven't quite got around to it
Because I got cooked by Lana.
Cooked by Big Nick.
Look, we say it's a pale ale that came out a little bit off-brand. It's a bit sour.
That's right. Maybe it didn't deserve the Cybeers name yet. We're waiting to perfect the recipe before we put the trademark on it.
That's what tomorrow is. And then, Rich, you've gone your favourite. We finally got you onto beers.
Yeah. So it's funny. It was when we did the brewing last time for those two beers was when I decided, when in Rome, right? We're at the brewery and that just started having beers. And
set you over the edge. Normally you'd be rocking in here. You'd have 4 different types of tonic. You'd have 3 gins, but we've actually got you, and it's a nice little entry, the better beer.
I do like it. It's nice. Yeah.
So
it's not too heavy.
No, it's quite nice.
Yeah.
And it's quite a nice day for Melbourne. Jack's still wearing a jumper on the way in, so it must not be too warm. But gentlemen, cheers.
Cheers.
Look, there are a number of people that have drunk these in the office, and I do remember pouring about 500 ml extra caramel into the mix when we were making these. This one is a big 7.5% dark Belgian ale. It's every bit as Big Nick as you'd imagine. So we do have a number of these in the office. So anyone who's watching and you would like us to send you some Big Nick, reach out. Jack, Triskele.
Yep. Look, it has a very strong, emphatic taste. It's quite sweet. It's fruity. A lot of people like that in their IPAs, XPAs these days.
Well,
right?
I'm glad that it's not an IPA or XPA.
I don't hate it.
Glowing review.
And Rich, your nice zero carb better beer.
Yeah. Tried and true, right? It's good stuff.
Absolutely. I can't remember who makes that. Is that the Inspired Unemployed?
Yeah, I believe so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
They've done well. They do the ginger beer as well, which is good.
They're doing a ginger beer. Actually, there's some in my fridge at home that you brought around that I still haven't touched because it's too much sugar for me.
We have to aspire to brew beers that well on our podcast here.
Honestly, if we ever got to be able to sell Cybeer, it would be a great day.
I mean, maybe they could sponsor Cybeers.
Hey, boys, if you're watching,
I'm sure they are.
Oh yeah,
Almost guaranteed.
Oh, dude, this pod gets the most views that you've ever seen.
Absolutely. Top 10 of Apple Podcasts.
Top 10 on Apple Podcast. Well, we can wish.
We can wish.
We can dream.
wish. Yeah.
Look, we are talking about a very fascinating topic, not just beers. We love talking beers, and there will also be beers of the cyber variety at CyberCon.
Right.
So CyberCon's
Exciting.
coming up in a couple of weeks. Jack, you're not attending, I believe.
I'm not, but I will be around in the city. I might be there for some drinks after the event ends. So could be an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rich, I believe you're coming down for a couple of days.
I'll be there.
So
Yep.
if you're watching this and you want to come and hang out, talk about cyber, drink some beers maybe, then come and see us.
Come to the
But
booth.
Today we're talking about SIEM solutions, I believe, gentlemen.
That's right. Yeah, so there's a lot we can talk about on the SIEM solution front. But
Are
to
we
make
talking
sure,
about SIEMs or XDRs, Jack?
well, we'll talk about both, and we'll make sure that we're clear about the difference. There's a lot of terminology that gets thrown around these days, isn't there? And it's
Oh.
sometimes not really clear where the line is drawn.
I don't even
blurred.
know the difference.
Yep.
I heard of one the other day. What's the next one over XDR? Is it EXDR? Is it
There's something.
Everyone's got their own name, right?
especially extended?
Oh,
XDR?
next gen is usually a
Next
word
gen.
that's thrown in.
Next gen. Yeah.
Love-
Started with
love me a bit of
firewalls.
next gen.
Now it's with SIEMs.
But talk to me then, Rich. What is for those of us? I'm sure if you're watching Cybeers, you understand what a SIEM solution actually is. But for those, I know my mother-in-law has started watching Cybeers. So
Great taste.
Great.
Great taste.
in moustaches.
Just everything if she's watching this.
So talk to me. What is a SIEM solution? Why do we need one?
So SIEM, or Security Information and Event Management Platform, is essentially a centralized repository to collect and correlate logs from various sources. So that could be your endpoints or your user workstations or your servers, your firewall, the syslog running on some strange, Linux server that someone's forgotten about. It's basically about getting all this information into a platform. It's parsing it so you can search across it effectively. And you're building alerts off it to be able to identify if something is out of the ordinary or something malicious is happening, that you can then receive that alert and respond to.
VPN.
Yep.
Microsoft 365. All
Yes.
these kinds of good things.
Cloud, anything.
Yeah. Gotcha. Look, and this is obviously important because it'll tell me what's going on in my environment. Is someone trying to get in from a nefarious country? It's not always our friends starting with an R.
No.
We're seeing a lot of traffic come from other places now as well, and a lot of other countries jumping in. I know you guys did a recent TL Blue about English-speaking threat actors,
Yes.
and now starting to see them in additional countries. Tell me a bit about that as well.
Yeah, so we're seeing threat actors like, traditionally and historically, they might just be, we're just going to use our servers in Russia. And
Hey, there's a country starting with an R.
in Russia. So, a lot of people in their perimeter may just be block traffic from Russia, which is, that's a strategy. But
Not a good strategy.
Not a good strategy.
It's
but
a strategy.
It's a strategy. It's
a
not.
start.
You want
it's whack-a-mole.
defense in depth. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. But what we see with now is the threat actors, they're leveraging virtual private servers hosted in US, Australia, all over the place, so that they're able to sort of blend into legitimate traffic for countries that are not necessarily going to be blocked.
Okay. And the thing we're seeing now is those countries are going after more structured data than unstructured.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
They're able to, so particularly if it's a English-speaking group, they're going to have a better understanding of what the data is because they can read the data and it makes sense. You don't have to use Google Translate if English isn't your first language. So you're able to look at this information and get a very clear understanding of what it is quickly. And some of the groups, we've seen ransomware groups where they just take terabytes and terabytes of data, which sometimes the client's like, yeah, they got a marketing folder with like our PSD files and like we don't
Recordings of Cybeers.
recordings of Cybeers. They're like, we don't
Everyone
care.
wants those.
We don't
Everyone wants the
care.
raw
The
files.
most sensitive information there is.
Yeah, the TLP
They can
red
see all
stuff.
the bloopers and the outtakes.
But they're able to be a lot more targeted. So they might, like one we've been working on recently was only a couple of gig that they took because they know what they're looking for. They're not going to waste time getting all this like just junk that no one cares about.
Yeah, gotcha. And my SIEM solution's going to tell me about that though.
If you configure correctly and you got the right logs coming in.
All right. So then, Jack, XDR.
Yeah. So I guess it goes back to the evolution of many of these platforms over time. Indeed, it all started with this centralized SIEM platform. But then organizations realized that although they were collecting all this data from endpoints and from places on the network, just collecting it, not actually stopping threats and not having the quick ability to go out and respond to these threats was a major hole. Enter EDR, right? Endpoint detection and response software, for people that may not know. So you'd run this alongside your SIEM on the endpoints, on the laptops, on your servers, kind of arguably the most vulnerable devices because they're being used all the time by people who may not have IT skills, right? So you had your EDR running and you had your SIEM running. Not very efficient though, because you got two different products, both for security. What if we can centralize this? So the next stage of the evolutionary process, XDR. It's where some of the EDR vendors started saying, well, the most common question we're getting in pre-sales,
Why are you just
what about my
stopping at the
Microsoft
endpoint?
365?
What about everything else?
What about my firewalls?
Yeah.
How are you going to help me with those? You can't run an agent on those, right?
And if they're already on the endpoint, then we've already lost, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the EDR vendors extended their monitoring capabilities. Hence the X in XDR. Extended EDR is probably another way to say it. It's where you have an EDR platform that logs back to a central console and has a limited ability to ingest a few other log sources. Not everything. It's not a data-based platform like a SIEM might be that is designed to ingest as much as possible. But to an extent, it can get some of these critical things in, maybe Microsoft, maybe your firewalls, the popular appliances.
Maybe your VPN.
Yeah, maybe, if you're lucky.
Maybe.
If you got the right one.
If you're lucky. Look, and as a community, as a cybersecurity community, we love acronyms. I personally hate them. We talk about cybersecurity like it's voodoo. Like what we do is meant to be shrouded in mystery. And we've just gone to this point. We go and throw a label on something and say, that's a cool new piece of tech. And then the whole community has to follow along, because if we don't, we just get left behind. And I think that's where we ended up with XDR. It could have been called SIEM Lite. Like,
Could have been lots of names.
Wouldn't that have been a great
You never know
thing?
what name's going to come out next.
Oh, no, don't. No. But then we're going to start talking about the next favorite acronym, that's CTI. So those of you who are playing at home, Cyber Threat Intelligence. So, Rich, where are we pulling this CTI from? What are we doing with it? How does that apply to this discussion around SIEM and XDR and everything?
Yeah, so CTI, Cyber Threat Intelligence, is all about gaining actionable information about an adversary and how they perform techniques and what they're doing, so that an organization can take that information and then be able to help prevent them from suffering any of these techniques or tools or anything like that, and building up the barriers for defense. So in terms of where you get CTI from, there are feeds out there that provide that information, and that can go in through to SIEMs as well. We, the DFIR team, we gather a lot of this information all the time. Seeing the same things often as well in terms of tooling and tactics, techniques, procedures with threat actors. So we gather all this information as part of our investigation. For one, we need to make sure that we're going to see it in the client environment, because I'm sure we'll touch on this later, but you put a SIEM in somewhere and an EDR tool out of the box, it's not necessarily going to block everything that these ransomware groups are doing. So it's all about being able to take what we find, put that in the tooling while we're recovering, while we're getting stuff back online, so that if it's seen in the environment, we'll know about it.
All right. So, Jack, interesting point. Out the box, though, I buy this product, right? I spend sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars on this product. It just works, yeah?
I'd hope so. Wouldn't that be a nice world to live in? Our engineering team might not be too happy about that, because they'd be out of a job. No, unfortunately, it often can't quite be that accurate. And there's always going to be ways we can improve these things. So perhaps one of the important factors to remember about CTI is that the best way to action this intelligence, or they call it actionable intelligence, is to make it specific to your organization. For example, a lot of threat actors we see out there might target specific industry verticals. Maybe they target different sectors. Maybe they target different sizes of business. You can take the CTI indicators or information related to those threat actors, and you can get a bit more specific and unique about how you use it for your own organization. Or you can work with a partner like us who can do that for you to make sure that you're not just holding this enormous blob of data that is CTI, getting heaps of noise that you don't care about, generating too many alerts on things that aren't important, right? You can really tailor it for yourself. And that's where you can add it into these security products out of the box to make them a bit more specific to your environment.
Yeah, okay. And all SIEM solutions are the same. Like there's obviously Sentinel has taken the world by storm a fair bit. We're a Microsoft security designated partner, I think is what they call it.
Yep.
There's obviously Splunk, there's Rapid7, there's QRadar, Exabeam, Sumo Logic. Then there's your open source stuff like Wazar, Wazoo. We still don't know which one to call it. If anyone from that organization can reach out and tell us how to say it, appreciate it, because you're definitely watching Cybeers. There's Security Onion, there's Elastic, there's OpenSearch, there's Kibana, there's so many. They all work and do the same thing, yeah?
Unfortunately, no. Yeah, because it's such a complex problem and so many environments are so different. We all know how much IT infrastructure is out there, the different kind of platforms people use. It's infinitely complex. And so these different SIEM vendors have found ways to target different areas that they might specialize in. You've got those that are focused more on user behavior analytics, right? Rapid7 is an example.
Exabeam as well.
Exabeam as well.
Rapid7 and Exabeam probably leaders in that area.
You've got some that are focused more on the big data approach, taking as many different data sources as possible and normalizing those and just making sure you can store that. And that's more of an elastic-based approach.
Splunk, Hadoop, all those bigger ones.
You've got some that charge for that data, such as Sentinel. So you can't just ingest all of it, and you have to be a bit specific about what you do to save yourself some cost and to get as much value as possible out of it as well.
And then what about the open source layer? Like there's a lot of talk at the moment around organizations building SIEM and MDR solutions on top of open source. This was a pipe dream for many organizations 10 years ago, but now we're seeing more of it. Tell me a bit more around that. We're doing it with Artemis. So how does that work?
We are. Little self-plug there. We do have our own SIEM platform called Artemis based on open source software, and there are several very reasonable open source solutions out there. Now, they do take a bit of configuration and tuning, so you need some expertise in that space to make it fit and work for you, but often it's a much cheaper option than going with a commercial partner who has a more mature product that's been built over many years. I would say kind of some of the keys to the open source layer are that it usually requires a few different integration augmentations to make it really useful. Like we said, out of the box, it's not going to be perfect, but it might be a lower bar than a lot of these commercial vendors. So it might take a little bit more tuning.
And a lot of CTI as well.
Yep, CTI is a really good example
there is
of that.
no CTI for these open source solutions, right? You've got to add in the stuff that Rich and his team's finding through ransomware investigations to know what you're actually looking for. So we've gone and pumped 8.5 years of data in CTI at Artemis, and we're also looking at all of our clients, all the TTPs and IOCs that come through from every client environment across that platform. And I think that's where I see the benefit of an MDR solution. That, yes, we're not going to know your environment as well as you are if you went and built your own SIEM, but then you need 14 people, you're in SOC, you need 14 people to staff that, you need all these things. Yes, absolutely. There's arguments around MDR solutions versus doing it in-house. If you can look and say, we understand that you're not going to know our environment as much as we are, but we're getting the CTI from over 100 other clients and we're getting that hive-like activity, you look and those trade-offs are really there. How many organizations can really afford to go and build a SOC? I think we did the math, it was $12 million to get it going for the first year.
Yeah, well, especially because you've got to consider the most important thing, we think, all hours of the day, right? I mean, Rich, tell me more about how many DEFA incidents happen during Australian business hours.
Oh, it's very rare, Jack. A lot of the time, like we might get engaged during the day, which makes sense. People will come in on a Monday and find that their systems have been impacted or that they've had a business email compromise, whatever it is. But a lot of the activity that is actually being done by the threat actors, the hands-on keyboard, tools being deployed, data exfiltration, dumping creds, all that stuff consistently, I'd say 95% of the time we are seeing that done overnight Australian time. So maybe 11 p.m. to like 5 a.m. is a really big activity period that we're seeing. So yeah, you probably want someone to be able to look at that overnight. It'd be a good thing to do.
Jeez, I love what we do. Do we ever sleep?
Sometimes.
Oh, look, Lana said this to me, so we seem to love recording Cybeers on a Friday, and we actually post on a Friday. I've gotten to the point now, I'm not leaving the office until 9 o'clock on a Friday night. Because
that's true. Yeah.
like, the phone calls typically come, and I know I'm comfortable. If 9 o'clock comes, then we're okay. There was one that we did where fortunately we were still there because the organisation needed boots on the ground, and they're a Melbourne organisation, and we responded within about 15 minutes. And we
we had 6 people there.
Yeah, on site on a Friday night. What, Rich? Friday nights?
Yes.
Are we ever going to get them back?
No, probably not. I think a lot of the reason.
Lie to me, my friend.
I think
make me feel good.
A lot of the reason why we have the Friday night special is because a lot of organisations it's kind of like we'll just give ourselves till Friday and we'll try and make it work. We'll try and figure out what happened, and then Friday will come around and be like, actually, we might need to contact our insurer or get some help on this, and that's inevitably when that Friday afternoon special will come through.
I love a Friday afternoon special.
Or a Monday morning is the other popular time when they come in and find everything's encrypted.
All right. Well, then tell me, we're talking about SIEM and XDR and EDR and all these other acronyms. Give me an idea how many ransomware investigations that your team have done where there was a SIEM in place.
5%. If they're for SIEM, yeah, I'd say 5%.
And you're up to hundreds of ransomware investigations. Yeah. So you're talking a handful. Like we could count on two hands how many organisations had a SIEM solution.
When they've got it, it's great. Makes our life a lot easier to be able to go through those logs and rely on them.
But surely if you've got a SIEM, you shouldn't be getting compromised. Isn't that the idea of, or even an XDR platform, right? It doesn't have to be a SIEM, but if you've at least got this maturity layer, surely you shouldn't be getting compromised.
Well, who's looking at the alerts overnight to check it?
The mailbox that's going to...
not the security at companyname.com that no one looks at.
Look, and that's probably the important thing, right, Jack? You can put a fire hose at something, but if it's not actually being directed in the right place, are you putting the right fire out?
That's right. And it can be alerting on every single technique in the MITRE ATT&CK framework, right? But if no one's there actually looking at that and responding to it at the time that it happens, by the time you come in the next day or perhaps over the weekend, it's certainly going to be too late. I mean, how often do we see that, Rich, where there actually are heaps of alerts in these tools, even if they're not the best, most expensive tools? Sometimes there are alerts, but if no one's looking at them, doesn't mean anything.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, a key piece of advice from me is, obviously we're a Microsoft partner, love the Microsoft solutions, but please, Defender Plan 1, let's not rely on that.
It's probably not quite good enough.
It's not quite. Step up to Plan 2. If you're on Business Premium, you can buy it as a bolt-on. If you're on E3, you can buy it as a bolt-on. If you're E5, you get it. But also, Rich, roll it out.
Please roll it out. We've had organizations that have been paying for like top level Defender licensing and they just didn't apply the license for a year.
Yeah.
We see critical servers in environments that don't have the tools installed on them. And what do you know? Those are the ones the threat actors get onto. So
it's important about doing that, the estate hygiene stuff, right? And then, Jack, you and I have had a lot of discussion about MDR providers, and we're saying you have to be looking at these things, but there's MDR providers that are saying, yes, we're looking at these things, but that might be an analyst who jumps out of bed at 1 o'clock in the morning and has a look at alert, that you need people looking at this stuff eyes on glass.
That's probably the other big thing to call out that we've seen a few times during DEFA, where the organisation has had a SIEM. They have had an MDR provider. So someone is looking at and triaging these alerts. But if the people triaging these alerts don't have the right expertise, I mean, we've seen on a number of occasions where the alert just gets marked as, oh, actually, that's fine. It's false positive. We won't worry about that. Tick. On to the next one. Right.
And it's not even that, right? It's making sure you've actually got people responding. Saw a really interesting stat. Our MTTD and MTTR are down to 4 minutes at the moment.
So what do those stand for?
Yeah, good shout out. Acronyms, remember? I assume everyone knows. Mean time to detect and mean time to respond. And Rich, we're seeing a group at the moment that we're working with. We used to say 16 days, I think it was average dwell
I think
time.
21 was a dwell time, last financial year, average.
But a particular ransomware group, FOG, I think we did, what was it? They were in and out within 10 hours?
I think it was about 10 or 12 hours that we're looking at. Yeah.
So from that time, from initial access, you've got to be onto these things. You can't be having it hit your SIEM. 1 o'clock in the morning, someone rolls over, drags himself out of bed, goes and looks at it. By the time it's 3 a.m., they might have already gotten in there and gotten latch removed and put backdoors in. You need to be responding to this stuff in real time.
And that's where the next level of service comes in as well, right? And we've talked about the first level, getting the SIEM in, collecting the logs. The second level, having someone actually looking at these logs, configuring the SIEM, making sure it's tuned correctly, and actually telling you something bad is happening. It's 2 a.m. Let's get everyone out of bed. We've got to get onto this, right? But then the third level, which we have an acronym for now too, MTTP, the mean time to protect.
Yes, we do.
This is where you actually work with your third party for specific situations to take action and response to these things happening, to isolate the host perhaps, or disable a user account, and putting SLAs in place to make sure that you get on top of these threats straight away. And then you get people out of bed and you can kind of broaden the response. But the number one priority under that model is to first take action on the threat. And given the threat actors are so effective, working so fast, pretty key, I think.
Yeah, and sometimes you're going to knock some things offline. But we have to be vigilant. The threat actors, they just need to get it right once. We need to get it right every single time. And that might mean disabling the CEO's user account. The SOC has disabled my user account when I've been flying over some random country. I jump on the plane's Wi-Fi all the time. Don't shoot me, Emeth. We've got controls in place. And then they'll disable my account. And I like that. The proactive nature, it has to be stopped before it can run further.
I think that's why that's a really good thing to discuss with your provider is how are we going to deal with lockouts and stuff like that. So that's one of the things we do during DFIR, and it's probably a little bit different situation to BAU. We're like, guys, if we see something else going on at 3 a.m., do you want us to lock it? And they're just like, yeah, do it and tell us about it in the morning because you guys just handle it. Yeah.
And I think we always say no organisation is going to have the same IT infrastructure or processes or approaches post-ransomware than they had when we first walked in.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And if you have a SIEM, hopefully you never see your smiley face.
Yeah, I get that a lot. So
it's because you've got such an approachable face, mate.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, talking through SIEM. I still am confused what XDR is. And if I'm confused, most people will be confused.
That's right. Too many acronyms.
I think a lot of the next-gen XDR platforms are starting to try and market themselves into that SIEM territory. And I still look that it's funny when you'd walk around Black Hat, DEF CON, some of the biggest conferences in the world in probably 2018. And these vendors would say, no, you don't need it. You just need EDR. It just has to be on the endpoint. We've got you. And now these EDR providers are moving into XDR, and I give it 2 years before they got fully blown SIEM solutions.
Agreed.
So,
what you really need is good advice from a technology neutral partner, right? Where you can combine the different platforms that are right for you, fill those gaps.
All right, gentlemen, SIEM is dead. Long live SIEM.
Cheers.
Cheers.